Hey friends, this is Goalie TV. Happy July, and obviously for those down south in the States, big day, but for us Edmonton Oilers fans, it is the start of what might be, for the next little bit anyway, a quiet summer unless the Oilers decide to really go tackle the goaltending right here, right now at the start of July. So obviously, for many of you, maybe a little bit of a disappointing free agency. For some of you, you're very happy that the Oilers more or less stood pat and just added a couple of surrounding pieces to the roster, because there's some stuff I want to talk about that might change your outlook on kind of how free agency went based on some work Stan Bowman and the Edmonton Oilers front office has already done in the past year or so. So with that, if you are new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button here on Goalie TV. Would love to have you aboard as a regular viewer here on the channel. I know I've been inactive the past week or so. Again, that is to do with taking some holidays and enjoying some time off and not stressing about what is normally a stressful time of year. Instead, standing on the beach in Cold Lake down there at Kinnasoo Beach and enjoying a good time. Some of you saw a shore lunch there that I got to fry up a walleye on the banks of, what was that, Bork Lake, and really enjoy myself a good vacation up north. So back down south now, and we're ready to rock and roll for what should be a very important next 2 months, no matter what the Oilers do, because again, this in the next 2 months is where you win the off-season, not on July 1st, as we saw after everything that happened last year. The first natural spot to hit this video with is, of course, the subtractions from the Edmonton Oilers roster this year. And upcoming, we will not have the services of Connor Brown, Corey Perry, Victor Arvidsson, John Klingberg, or Derek Ryan. So the Oilers move on from 5 guys that are substantially older than the direction the Oilers might want to go. I know Connor Brown maybe not necessarily the oldest guy on that list, nor with John Klingberg, but still, the Oilers need some younger bodies in the lineup. They need a little bit more foot speed in the bottom 6, and they just need a different mix after 2 straight cup finals where, things went quiet for the Oilers in the cup final at some point. This year it was a bad back half of the cup final that cost them. Last year it was a bad front half of the cup final that cost them. So what we'll see is if the Oilers, with a different mix in the bottom 6 and maybe a couple of new top 9 forwards, can really go out there and change the dynamic in the cup final. There is nobody in the NHL that really stands up to the Oilers other than the Florida Panthers. That's kind of the key here for us Oilers fans. Everybody last year that was down on the team's changes or trading away guys in the offseason was like, there's no way this team gets back to the cup finals. So now with that learned and that lesson tucked away in the back of the brain, I'm not going to say the Oilers cannot make the cup final. And the big thing here is this year's Oilers team will be substantially different than the last 2 years, right? The Oilers for the last 2 years have run pretty much the exact same guys. I mean, okay, Vasily Podkolzin's new. Really, Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson were new, but they weren't getting regular skating time in the NHL playoffs. So there's not like there was massive change. I know you didn't have Ryan McLeod and Warren Foegele and all that. That just wouldn't have mattered, and especially now that Ryan McLeod's making $5 million. And for Warren Foegele, he's on an LA Kings team that is going to struggle to fight their way out of a wet paper bag early, and unless they add Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, they're not going to get going. Again, signing guys that go deep into the playoffs like Corey Perry and Cody Ceci and Ken Holland's just collecting all the surrounding pieces of the Edmonton Oilers like candy here this offseason. It's not maybe the best strategy, as we learned last year. So let's move forward to the additions here, in which Matt Tompkins, you've got Curtis Lazar, Andrew Mangiapane, and Riley Stillman come aboard for the Edmonton Oilers. And this is where I want to talk about the body of work over the past year from Stan Bowman, because this list here does not inspire, oh my God, confidence like maybe, signing some of the guys last year might have. Again, last year we had a lot of roster UFAs. This year we just kind of let them walk. And, Mangiapane is going to slot in the top six, guaranteed at least to start the year. Kind of similar to the same idea as Jeff Skinner. Just Mangiapane maybe has better legs and maybe has a little bit more defensive reliability than Jeff Skinner did, at least early going in the regular season. Curtis Lazar going to challenge for your fourth line center role. Should be a lock, but again, you know who the Oilers all have challenging for that role. So Curtis Lazar, I wouldn't even be surprised if he ends up either on waivers or down in Bakersfield. No matter where he plays this year, Curtis Lazar is just kind of a depth piece you like to have around, and we'll see how that translates now for the Edmonton Oilers and the former Edmonton Oil King. Riley Stillman, again, that's a pure depth piece, same as Matt Tompkins. Both players will likely spend 98% of the season in the AHL. So that's really that part. That's the easy part. The additions and the subtractions for the Edmonton Oilers. Not too much to really get excited about or upset with. Again, some people might be rejoicing that Corey Perry is gone, and obviously the Perry curse goes with it. And now hopefully LA, like I said, just doesn't figure it out after a bad start, and I would be surprised to see LA be able to fight their way out of a bad start this year, just knowing that, again, you don't have Connor and Leon who can put a team on your back and decide to get going. Kopitar and Doughty used to be able to do that, but they're also in their late 30s now, so the miles have added up, especially after a couple of playoff rounds against the Oilers over the past few years. The Oilers cap space, I want to talk about this, just kind of some of my views on it here as we approach, what could be quiet time or what could be time for the Oilers to make a trade to really go out there and free up some more salary cap. Without further moves, the Oilers really control cap space with roster size. Again, it matters to the Oilers how they want to construct the NHL roster. Do you want to have 22 players on there? Do you want to have 21 and save some cap space, for the first month? And then when guys start getting injured, that's when you start bringing up 22 players at all times. Or, I don't know if you can fill out a full 23, but the Oilers sit there kind of at that 21, 22 space. And especially, coming into a season where you've got a situation where you need the cap space for the trade deadline again, or as the season progresses, you need the cap space for a goaltender. Every little dollar saved is going to be huge, and especially, adding Mangiapane and adding Curtis Lazar and adding guys that maybe are a little bit younger than the guys we lost, and then as well, adding Matt Savoy, Tomaszek, guys like that should, and I say should, allow the Oilers to, get a little bit more going earlier in the season. Again, it wasn't as drastic as 2-12-1 or 3-12-1, whatever it was, to start 23-24, but 24-25 did not start much better. The Oilers, after 20 games, were hanging around the 500 mark, kind of treading water. They'd win some, lose some, just wouldn't get going in any single direction, and truly by the end of the year still hadn't gotten in any direction, and at that point they were very banged up, so it was kind of hard to. But this year, if the Oilers, generally speaking, only lose one player due to injury, that in itself will be a huge key to how this roster kind of forms together. If the penalty kill can stay consistent, I'm not asking the penalty kill, and as an Oilers fan, the penalty kill never needs to be a top 5, top 3, whatever you want to say, unit in the NHL. It just needs to be around that top 12 mark. Again, what the Oilers penalty kill was last year in the bottom half of the league was not good enough to get the job done, specifically in the playoffs as well. But again, if you get the power play going back towards 30, not quite 30, 29.5, as opposed to, I think it was settling around 27 this year, that will change the dynamic a little bit, and especially as well if it continues success through all 4 rounds of the playoffs. And then as well for the Oilers, like I said, not a substantial improvement on the penalty kill, but a penalty kill improvement to kind of get up towards that 81-82% range, kind of that top 12 mark, and then suddenly the Oilers are looking really, really good throughout the regular season. On the special teams, the 5-on-5, again, should start to figure itself out now that, you're adding some younger, different bodies after a playoff run instead of keeping some older bodies and adding some older bodies. That just meaning, they'll be fresh and ready to go as soon as we get to game one of the regular season. And that might be evident very much so in the start of the preseason. So that's kind of how I'm viewing the roster a little bit there. And then this one is tough for the Oilers. Simply put, goaltending was always going to be the hardest upgrade of the summer, the most critical upgrade of the summer. Not necessarily from an organization standpoint, but from a fan base standpoint. And obviously as well, the criticism around whoever is acquired will be pretty highly doled out as well, because the options out there are pretty limited, like I said, and the Oilers are going to have to get creative, right? We've heard everything from John Gibson, Jeremy Swayman, Ilya Sorokin to Carter Hart. And when you look at all those names, right, it just seems kind of impossible. John Gibson's gone, obviously, to Detroit. Jeremy Swayman, I think the Boston Bruins are going to be pretty content to try and compete again in the East. And then, obviously, Ilya Sorokin, depending on what the New York Islanders do the rest of the summer. But again, I just don't see how we, A, have the assets for that, or B, can get a goaltender of that caliber out of a situation like New York's, given how young he still truly is. So for the Oilers, the goaltending was always going to be the hard one this summer, and it looks like that will continue to be the case until something either shakes loose or the Oilers get mighty creative and find a victory they weren't planning on. So for right now, right, obviously the off-season, maybe not a huge win, but again, I want to harp back to something I said right off the start, which is where the Oilers got creative over the past little bit. You have names like Quinn Hudson, you have David Tomaszek, you have guys like Josh Szymanski. There's a bunch of guys the Oilers have signed prior to July 1st that changed the complexion of this team quite substantially, whether it's immediately to start the regular season or it's as we go along throughout the season as injuries pop up and as guys win and lose roster spots. Noah Philp obviously coming back. He was re-signed. That's a huge addition back again to the Oilers' bottom six, specifically if he can win the job or be a guy flip-flopping with Curtis Lazar for that job. Because again, it is kind of due time that Noah Philp takes the reins here at the NHL level and plays, I want to say 40 games. I won't put Noah Philp as a 50-plus gamer this year, but 40 games is very achievable for Noah Philp. And again, to think that Curtis Lazar, kind of given his journeyman path across the NHL the last several years, I doubt he's an all 82 games player either for the Edmonton Oilers. Then you have guys like Max Jones, you have guys all up and down the roster in Bakersfield that, deserve shots as well. James Hamblin, does he get a chance? Does he suit up for the Oilers for, 15, 20 games this year? And do the Oilers, just choose to finally say enough's enough, and they do have the personnel to do it now, that you don't have to stick a center at center. Can you play a center on wing? Can you do this or that? And that might be the true test, as we saw the Oilers kind of get creative in the playoffs at times. Obviously, Adam Henrique has the ability to switch to left wing. You think for the Oilers as well, there's got to be some other guys in the organization that wouldn't mind playing wing just for an opportunity to play in the NHL, and obviously the opportunity to also, take a little bit less responsibility, at least to get the season started, and just go out there and shoot the puck, pass the puck, and try and score as many goals as the Oilers can to really bond this team together to get through what will be a grind of a season. Again, that's kind of where the mediocre start comes in for the Oilers last year. Is it was more so because of a long off season. I get that, but for the Oilers, again, starting slow this year and not finishing first in the division, if you're serious about winning the Stanley Cup, is going to be a very, very, very tall task, because again, you've got the miles on you from the playoffs. You've got the miles on you from some injuries, and you're expecting basically a different recipe this year to start the year, where the younger guys, the more non-core guys, come in and contribute, and allow Draisaitl and McDavid to warm up throughout games 1 through 8 and games 1 through 5 of the regular season, because they're going to take time. And obviously as well, the defense remains substantially unchanged, and the goaltending at this point hasn't changed. So you've got some situations there where again, if the younger guys up front can just pot some goals and, pad the stats a little bit early on, it's going to really save face as this season continues along for the Edmonton Oilers. So that's really all I've got for you here today. Obviously, the Oilers kind of in tough in the goaltending market. We know that. The additions, maybe not what people were hoping for, but still solid nonetheless. And Mangiapane is going to be a really fun add. Again, if you watched him as much as I did down here in Calgary over the past several years when he was still here, he was a fun little player to watch. And obviously the other two are going to be just pure Bakersfield Condors additions. And for friends and down there in Bakersfield, they're going to enjoy having some different guys that should be sticking around and having a good impact on that team this year. So friends, thanks for being aboard here today. Again, of course, a reminder, if you are new to the channel, to consider hitting that subscribe button. I know I've kind of yacked your ear off for the past 16 minutes, but I appreciate you hanging out with me here today. And as always, I will catch you in the next one.